Hello everyone, welcome back. So this video lecture is a continuation of the previous video. In the previous video, we came across the onboard communication interface. So in this video lecture, we'll come across the external communication interfaces here. So the external communication interfaces refers to the different communication channels or buses used by the embedded system to communicate with the external world here. If the embedded system want to communicate with the external world, it uses the communication channels. So those refer as external communication interfaces here. So in this external communication interfaces, it uses the communication channels or buses like RS-232 cable and RS-485 cable. Then it uses a USB. Then IEEE 1394 firewire. Then it uses the infrared, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, Zigbee technology, then GPRS, then 3G, 4G, LTE. So these will act as communication channels or buses used by the embedded system to communicate with the external world here. So RS-232 USB, so these will act as what the buses, and Bluetooth, infrared, Wi-Fi, Zigbee, GPRS, these will act as channels used by the embedded system to communicate with the external world here. Now we'll see the first one, the RS-232 and RS-485 cables here. So as we can see in the left hand side, so this is RS-232 cable and this is RS-485 cables here. And RS-232C recommended standard number, that is revision C. So we'll see in detail about RS-232. So RS-232C from the Electronic Industry Association is a legacy full duplex wired asynchronous serial communication interface here. And the RS-232 interface is developed by the Electronics Industries Association EIA during the early 1960s here. And RS-232 extends the UART, Universal Asynchronous Receiver Transmitter Communication Signals for external data communication here. And RS-232 follows the EIA standard for bit transmission here. And as per the EIA standard, logic 0 is represented with the voltage between +3 and +25 voltage, and logic 1 is represented with voltage between -3 and -25 voltage here. And in EIA standard, logic 0 is known as a space and logic 1 as a mark here. So the voltage between -3 and -25 voltage is known as mark, and the voltage between +3 and +25 voltage is known as space here. And the RS-232 interface defines various handshaking and the control signals for communication apart from the transmitter and receiver signal lines for data here. So it defines the various handshaking. So handshaking means if the embedded system is connected with the external world, or it is connected with the subsystems, then handshaking should be done between the embedded system and the external world or the subsystems here. So RS-232 supports two different types of connectors. One is DB9, so which has 9 connector pins. Then second one, that is a DB25, which has 25 pin connectors here. So the following figure illustrates the connector or the details for DB9 and DB25 here. So this is a DB9 pin connector and this is a DB25 pin connector, so which has 25 pins in a DB25 and in a DB9 which has 9 pin connectors here. So usually this DB25 which we can find in the system, and DB9, this is the other terminal of the RS-232 cable, so which can be used to connect with the subsystems here. So this cable will be used in the microcontroller lab to connect with the system and the microcontroller here. Okay. And RS-232 is a point-to-point communication interface, and the device involved in RS-232 communication are called as data terminal equipment. So the device which are involved in RS-232 are called as a data terminal equipment and data communication equipments here. And the data terminal ready signal is activated by DTE when it is ready to accept the data here. So when it is ready to accept the data, so the data terminal ready signal is activated, and the data set ready DSR is activated by DCE, that is a data communication equipment, when it is ready for establishing a communication link with the other systems here. And DTR should be in the activated state before the activation of DSR here. And the data carrier detect, that is a DCD, control signal is used by the DC to indicate the DTE, that is a good signal, is being received here. Now coming to the another communication interface, so that is the universal serial bus, USB, as you already aware about this USB cables. So this USB is a wired high-speed serial bus for data communication. So the first version of USB, that is USB 1.0, was released in the year 1995 and was created by the USB core group members consisting of Intel, Microsoft, IBM, Compaq, Digital and Northern Telecom here. And the USB communication system follows a star topology with the USB host at the center and one or more USB peripheral devices or USB host connected to it here. So it follows a star topology with the USB host at the center here. A USB 2.0 host can support connection up to 127 host, including the slave peripheral devices and the other USB host here. Okay, so as in the figure you can see, so the USB which follows the star topology. Okay, the following figure illustrates the star topology for USB device connection. So where we have USB host, okay, two USB hosts we have, then the peripheral devices are connected to this USB host here, and USB transmit data in packet form. So whatever the data has to be transmitted between the host and the peripheral devices, the data is divided into the packets here. A packet is it can be a fixed size or it cannot be a fixed size format here or packets here. So each data packet has a standard format, and the USB communication is a host initiated done here. The USB host contains a host controller which is responsible for controlling the data communication, including establishing connectivity with the USB slave devices or packetizing or formatting the data here. There are different standards for implementing the USB host controller interface, namely Open Host Control Interface and Universal Host Control Interface here. The physical connection between USB peripheral device and the master device is established with a USB cable, and the USB cable in a USB 2.0 supports communication distance up to 5 meters here. The USB 2.0 standard uses two different types of connector at the end of the USB cable for connecting the USB peripheral devices and the host device here. And a type A connector is used for upstream connection with the host, and a type B connector is used for a downstream connection with the slave device here. So it has two types, one is a type A and type B. So type A, which is used for connection with the host, and type B, which is used to connect with the slave devices here. And the USB connector present in the desktop PC or laptop are example for type A USB connectors here. Okay, so these type A USB connectors are used for connection with the host, and both type A and type B connectors contain 4 pins for communication here, so which can be used to connect with the slave devices here. And the pin details for connectors are listed in the table given below. So it has 4 pins. The first pin indicates the V bus, which carries the power or which carries the voltage, and pin 2 which carries the negative voltage, that is a differential data carrier line, and pin 3 which carries the positive voltage, a differential data carrier line, and pin 4, so which should be grounded, a ground signal line here. And USB uses a differential signals for data transmission. It improves the noise immunity. Okay, and the USB interface has the ability to supply power to the connecting devices. So two connection lines, that is ground and power, of the USB interface are dedicated for carrying power. It can supply power up to 500 RNA and 5 voltage here. Okay, and USB supports 4 different types of data transfers like control, bulk, isochronous, and interrupt here. Control transfer is used by the USB system software to query, configure, and issue commands to the USB devices here. And the bulk transfer is used for sending a block of data to a device. And bulk transfer supports error checking and correction here. If any correction or data error checking should be done, so with the help of a bulk transfer, it can be done here. Then transferring a data to a printer is an example for bulk transfer here. And isochronous data transfer is used for real-time data communication. In isochronous transfer, data is transmitted as streams in real time. Isochronous transfer does not support error checking and retransmission of data in case of any transmission loss here. And all streaming devices like audio devices and medical equipments for data collection make use of isochronous transfer here. Then coming to the IEEE 1394, that is a FireWire. Now coming to the IEEE 1394 FireWire cable. So I hope you are familiar with this cable. So this cable which is used to connect the digital camera with the system here. Okay. So IEEE 1394 is a wired isochronous high-speed serial communication bus. It is also known as high performance serial bus here. So the research on 1394 was started by the Apple in the year 1985, and the standard for this was initiated by the IEEE here. And Apple implementation of 1394 protocol is popularly known as FireWire here. And iLink is the 1394 implementation from Sony Corporation here. And Lynx is the implementation from the Texas Instruments here. The 1394 supports a peer-to-peer connection and point-to-multipoint communication, allowing 63 devices to be connected on the bus in a tree topology here. And 1394 is a wired serial interface, and it can support a cable length of 15 feet for interconnection here. There are two differential data transfer lines A and B per connector. So in 1394 cable, normally the differential lines of A are connected to B and vice versa here. The 1394 is a popular communication interface for connecting embedded devices like digital camera, camcorder, scanners to desktop computers for data transfer and storage here. Unlike USB interface, IEEE 1394 does not require a host for communicating between devices here. It does not require the host. Directly the devices like a digital camera, camcorders are directly connected with the systems here or embedded system. For example, we can directly connect a scanner with a printer for printing here. So it does not require a host. The data rate supported by 1394 is far higher than the one supported by USB 2.0 interface here. And the 1394 hardware implementation is much costlier than USB implementation here. Now coming to the infrared. So this will act as a communication channel which is used by the embedded system. Infrared is a serial half duplex line of sight based wireless technology for data communication between devices here. So IRDA, that is infrared, is in use from the olden days of communication, and you may be very familiar with it. So can you tell me where these infrared are used? So these infrared are used with the TV remote control here. So the remote control of your TV, VCD player, etc. works on infrared data communication principle here. Infrared communication technique uses infrared waves of the electromagnetic spectrum for transmitting the data here. And IRDA supports a point-to-point and point-to-multipoint communication, provided all devices involved in the communication are within the line of sight here, within the range. The typical communication range for infrared, that is IRDA, lies in the range of 10 centimeter to 1 meter here. So the range can be increased by increasing the transmitting power of IR device here. IR infrared supports data rates ranging from 9600 bits per second to 16 Mbps. Depending on the speed of the data transmission of IR is classified into serial IR, medium IR, fast IR, and very fast IR, and ultra fast IR here. So the serial IR supports transmission rates ranging from 9600 bits per second to 115.2 kbps, and medium IR supports data rates of 0.576 Mbps to 1.152 Mbps here. Then fast IR supports data rates up to 4 Mbps, and very fast IR is designed to support high data rates up to 16 megabytes per second here. And ultra fast IR supports up to 96 Mbps here. And IRDA communication involves a transmitter unit for transmitting the data over IR channel and receiver for receiving the data here. So infrared light emitting diode LED is the IR source for transmitter, and the receiving end, a photodiode, acts as a receiver here. Both the transmitter and receiver unit will be present in each device supporting IRDA communication for bidirectional data transfer. So such IR units are known as a transceiver, so which will act as a transmitter as well as the receiver here. Certain devices like a TV requires control, always require unidirectional communication, and so they contain either the transmitter or the receiver unit here. Okay, the remote control unit contains the transmitter unit and the TV contains the receiver unit here. Now coming to the Bluetooth. So the Bluetooth will be used as a communication channel which is used by the embedded system to communicate with the external world here. A Bluetooth is a low cost, low power, short range wireless technology for data and voice communication here. And Bluetooth was first proposed by Ericsson in the year 1994. Bluetooth operates at 2.4 gigahertz of the radio frequency spectrum and uses the frequency hopping spread spectrum technique for communication here. Literally it supports a data rate up to 1 Mbps and a range of approximately 30 to 100 feet here for data communication here. Like infrared IRDA, Bluetooth communication also has two essential parts, a physical link part and a protocol part here. So the physical link is responsible for the physical transmission of data between devices supporting Bluetooth communication. So the physical link works on the wireless principle, making use of radio frequency waves for communication. And Bluetooth enabled devices essentially contain a Bluetooth wireless radio for the transmission and reception of the data here. The protocol part is the responsible for defining the rules of communication. If two devices wants to communicate each other using this technology, so it requires the rules or protocols here. The rules governing the Bluetooth communication is implemented in the Bluetooth protocol stack here. Each Bluetooth device will have a 48-bit unique identification number, and the Bluetooth communication follows a packet-based data transmission here. So whatever the data has to be transmitted between the devices, the data has to be divided into the packets here. So the Bluetooth supports a point-to-point, that is a device-to-device, as well as point-to-multi-point. So device to multiple device broadcasting here as a wireless communication here. So the point-to-point communication follows the master-slave relationship. So one device should be master. So the device which sending the data or packet to the other device will act as a master-slave, and the other device which is receiving this data will act as a slave device here. So a Bluetooth device can function either master or slave here. When a network is formed with one Bluetooth device as a master and more than one device as a slave, it is called as a piconet here. A piconet supports a maximum of 7 slave devices here. Okay. Now coming to the Wi-Fi. A Wi-Fi or wireless fidelity is the popular wireless communication technique for networked communication of devices. Wi-Fi follows IEEE 802.11 standard, and Wi-Fi is intended for network communication and supports IP, Internet Protocol based communication here. If any systems want to communicate or want to share the data with the help of Wi-Fi, so those systems are identified with the help of IP here. And it is essential to have a device identities in a multi-point communication to address specific devices for data communication here. In an IP-based communication, each device is identified by its IP address, so which is unique to each device on the network here. Wi-Fi based communication requires an intermediate agent called Wi-Fi routers. So here we require the intermediate agents like Wi-Fi routers or wireless access points which communicates between the different devices to manage the communication here. The Wi-Fi router is responsible for restricting the access to a network, assigning IP address to devices on the network, routing data packets to intended devices on the network here. So here the responsibilities of Wi-Fi router is to restrict the access to a network, assigning IP addresses to devices, and routing the data packets to the specific devices on the network here. Wi-Fi enabled devices contain a wireless adapter for transmitting and receiving data in the form of radio signals through an antenna. The hardware part of it is known as a Wi-Fi radio here. A Wi-Fi operates at 2.4 GHz or 5 GHz of radio spectrum, and they coexist with other ISM band devices like Bluetooth here. The following figure shows a typical interface of devices in a Wi-Fi network. So if I want to connect the systems or the other systems like mobile game controllers, okay, with the internet, and I require the intermediate agent, that is a Wi-Fi router here. So with this Wi-Fi router, the systems will be connected to the internet here, and each systems will be identified by its unique IP addresses in the network here. Now coming to the Zigbee technology. Zigbee is a low power, low cost wireless network communication protocol based on the IEEE 802.15.4. So that is a 2006 standard here. Zigbee is targeted for low power, low data rate and secure applications for wireless personal area networking here. And the ZigBee specification supports a robust mesh network containing multiple nodes. So this networking strategy makes the network reliable by permitting messages to travel through a number of different paths to get from one node to the another node here. ZigBee technology operates worldwide at the unlicensed band of radio spectrum, mainly at 2.4 to 2.484 gigahertz and 902 to 928 megahertz and 868.0 to 868.6 megahertz here. Okay, so this will operate worldwide at the unlicensed band of radio spectrums. And ZigBee supports an operating distance up to 100 meters and a data rate of 20 to 250 kbps here. So the diagram shows the ZigBee. So in the ZigBee terminology, each ZigBee devices falls under any of the following ZigBee devices category here. So ZigBee coordinator, ZC, or network coordinator. So the ZigBee coordinator, which acts as a root of the ZigBee network, and the ZigBee coordinator is responsible for initiating the ZigBee network, and it has the capability to store information about the network here. And the ZigBee router, or the full function device, FFD, responsible for passing the information from device to another device or to another the ZigBee network here. And a ZigBee end device, ZED, or reduced function device, so it is responsible of or containing the ZigBee functionality for data communication. It can talk only with the ZR or ZC, that is a ZigBee router or ZigBee coordinator, and does not have the capability to act as a mediator for transferring the data from one device to the another device here. Now coming to the last communication interface, that is a GPRS 3G 4G LTE. So GPRS is a communication technique for transferring data over a mobile communication network like a GSM. A data is sent as a packets in a GPRS communication. The transmitting device splits the data into several related packets here. At the receiving end, the data is reconstructed by combining the received data packets here. So framing of data is done at the receiving side here. And the GPRS supports a theoretical maximum transfer rate of 171.2 kbps here. In a GPRS communication, the radio channel is concurrently shared between several users instead of dedicating a radio channel to a cell phone user here. The GPRS communication divides the channel into 8 time slots and transmits data over the available channel here. And the GPRS supports IP, point-to-point protocol, and X.25 protocols for communication here. GPRS is mainly used by mobile enabled embedded devices for data communication. The device should support the necessary GPRS hardware like GPRS modem and GPRS radio here. To accomplish the GPRS based communication, the carrier network also should have a support for GPRS communication, and the GPRS is an old technology and it is being replaced by new generation data communication like the edge technology, high speed downlink packet access, etc., which offer the high bandwidth for communication here. Now coming to the embedded firmware. So the embedded firmware refers to the control algorithm or program instruction and or the configuration settings that an embedded system developer dumps into the code memory of the embedded system. It is an unavoidable part of an embedded system. Usually the embedded system contains the two memory, one is the program memory and the data memory. So the program memory contains the program instruction or the configuration settings, so that is developed by the programmer, so which dumps into the code memory here. So this part is the unavoidable part of an embedded system here. So there are various methods available for developing the embedded firmware. They are listed below. In the first method, writing the program in high-level languages like embedded C or C++ using an IDE, that is integrated development environment. So the IDE will contain an editor, compiler, linker, debugger, simulator, etc. So the IDEs are different for different families of processor controller. For example, the Keil Microvision version 3 IDE is used for all family members of 8051 microcontroller as well as for LPC 2148 since it contains the generic 8051 compiler C51 here. And in the second method, writing a program in assembly language using the instructions supported by your application's target processor or controller. So the instruction set for each family of a processor or controller is different, and the program written in either of the methods given above should be converted into the processor understandable machine code before loading it into the program memory here. And the processor of converting the program written in either high-level languages or processor controller specific assembly code to machine readable binary code, that is called as a X file creation here. So the methods used for X file creation is different depending on the programming technique used here. If a program is written in embedded C or C++ using IDEs, the cross compiler included in the IDE converts it into the corresponding processor controller understandable X file here. If we are following the assembly language based programming technique, we can use the utilities supplied by the processor or controller vendors to convert the source code into the X file here. Also, a third party tools are available which may be free of cost for this conversion here. So usually the third party tool we'll be using is the FlashMagick here. Okay. Now coming to the other system components. The other system components refer to the components or circuits or the integrated circuits which are necessary for the proper functioning of the embedded systems here. Some of the circuits may be essential for the proper functioning of the processor or controller and firmware execution here, like watchdog timer, reset integrated circuit, brownout production integrated circuit, etc. are example of circuits or integrated circuits which are essential for the proper functioning of the processor or controller here. Some of the controllers or the system on chip integrate these components within a single integrated circuit and does not require such components exactly externally connected to the chip for proper functioning here. And depending on the system requirement, the embedded system may include the other ICs for performing specific function, level translator ICs for interfacing circuit with different logic levels, etc. here. So the other system component, that is a reset circuit, is required for the embedded system for proper functioning. So the reset circuit is essential to ensure that the device is not operating at the voltage level where the device is not guaranteed to operate during the system power on here. So the reset signal brings the internal register and the different hardware systems of the processor or controller to know the state and starts the firmware execution from the reset vector here. So the reset signal can be either active high or active low here. Since the processor operation is synchronized to a clock signal, the reset pulse should be wide enough to give time for clock oscillator to stabilize before the internal reset state starts here. So the following figure illustrates a register capacity based passive reset circuit for active low, active high and low configuration. The reset pulse width can be adjusted by changing the resistance value R and capacitance value C here. Okay. And a brownout production circuit, the other system components required for the embedded systems, and it prevents the processor or controller from unexpected program execution behavior when the supply voltage to the processor or controller falls below a specified voltage here. And it is essential for battery powered devices since there are greater chances for battery voltage to drop below the required threshold here. So the processor behavior may not be predictable if the supply voltage falls below the recommended operating voltage here. It may lead to situations like data corruption here. A brownout production circuit holds the processor or controller in a reset state when operating voltage falls below the threshold until it rises above the threshold voltage here. Certain processor or controller supports a built-in brownout production circuit which monitors the supply voltage internally here. If the processor or controller does not integrate a built-in brownout production circuit, the same can be implemented using external passive circuit or supervisor integrated circuits here. And the following figure illustrates a brownout circuit implementation using Zener diode and a transistor for processor controller with active low reset logic here. The Zener diode DZ and a transistor Q forms out of this circuit. The transistor conducts always when the supply voltage VCC is greater than the sum of voltage BE and VZ, that is a Zener voltage here. The transistor stops conducting when the supply voltage falls below voltage of BE and voltage of Zener diode. Select the Zener diode with the required voltage for setting the low threshold value off for the VCC power supply here. And another, that is the other subsystems, that is oscillator unit. A processor or a microcontroller is a digital device made up of a digital combination and sequential circuits. So the instruction execution of the microprocessor controller occurs in a synchronization with a clock signal here. The oscillator unit of the embedded system is responsible for generating the precise clock for the processor, and certain processor or controllers integrated a built-in oscillator unit and simply require an external ceramic resonator or quartz crystal for producing the necessary clock signals here. So quartz crystals and ceramic resonators are equivalent in operation, however they possess a physical difference here. And certain devices may not contain a built-in oscillators unit and require the clock pulses to be generated and supplied externally here. So the following figure illustrates the usage of a quartz crystal, ceramic resonator and external oscillator chip for clock generation here. So here quartz crystals, resonator and the crystal oscillators are connected with the controller and the microprocessor here. So thank you for watching this video, and this is the end of the module 3. Okay, so I hope these video lectures are helping you to understand the concepts. So if any doubts or clarification is required, post your queries in discussion forum in the Moodle. Okay, so keep learning, stay home, stay safe. Thank you.